Thanks for joining me, everyone. Yes, America has an immigration paradox that really goes back to, I think, as far back as Ronald Reagan, and successive administrations have failed to address the proper development of immigration policy that's fair to Americans and that's fair to immigrants. The result has been that today, and obviously the past many years, we have a population of people who came to this country as children illegally with their parents and who have now become productive citizens who are just like anyone else. They're in college, they've got jobs, and yet they have no citizenship and they live in a shadow, and it's not right. I think that that's something that all sides recognize. At the same time, the issue has become so politicized, whereas you have people implicitly in the business world who want to have very liberal. Hi, dear. How are you going to get there? And thank you for joining me. America's immigration paradox goes back as far as the presidency of Ronald Reagan and successive administrations, both Democrat and Republican, and that is that we had no coherent policy to maintain our border security and make sure that illegal aliens, people were not arriving illegally. And it was sort of an implicit looking the other way by both sides. On the right, you had, so-called right, you had business interests who wanted cheap labor, which undermines the value of American labor and all of the gains that labor, particularly labor unions, have made over 100 years. On the left, you had groups like the National Lawyers Guild and others that want to have world government. They want to have an influx of immigrants into the United States to change the complexion of the United States and to change our population and to merge the United States into a world order. The globalist crowd, people who want American culture, American identity, to be erased, not to mention American borders and American language. And both sides sort of worked hand in hand. And now we have a situation where you've got young people who came here illegally as children, who have grown up here, who are Americanized, who are productive citizens, they're college students, they're in business, and yet they're living in the shadows. They don't have citizenship, and that's wrong. I think people understand that. So what do? How do we proceed after these successive administrations who have failed to come up with a coherent policy? Well, I would suggest that President Donald Trump actually has a coherent policy, the first president to have it and to boldly state it and to have the will to carry it out. And that is, in a sense, a two-step solution, a two-step program. The first step is to secure America's borders, America's points of entry, by building a wall on the Mexican border, by checking the status of people coming into the country through other means, ports, airports, the Canadian border, etc., to make sure that people are coming into the country legally and that they've registered and that we know who they are and we know that they are guests. Maybe to loosen up and liberalize immigration policy itself so we could have more people come in, which is probably a good idea. And then the second part is to offer a path to citizenship for the DACA people, the people who have been here since they were children. President Obama tried it with a very temporary measure, one that was unconstitutional by most sources and one that probably would be overturned, by issuing an executive order, and that's really not a permanent solution. The permanent solution is one that needs to come from Congress and then signed by the president into law. And that seems to me to be, as I just stated, a solution that on the one hand strengthens the borders and builds the wall so that we don't have another influx of illegal aliens, and offers a pathway to citizenship for people who are already here and who grew up here, so that they can be properly vetted. They can apply for citizenship without fear. Then they can have a background check to make sure they're not criminals and to make sure that they are self-sufficient, and thus become citizens in a relatively easy and quickly processed means. The only other piece of the puzzle should be a reform of the the extended family laws. What's called the chain migration, which is that while chain migration should be in place, and it has been in place in this country going back to the 1940s, where an immigrant, can bring their parents, their children, their immediate family into the country. At the same time, those laws have been expanded to the degree that people could bring in their adult brothers and their families and their sisters and their families, and then once they get here, then their spouses bring in their families. And the result is that we don't really have much control over who comes in. I think that the extended family should continue, but it should continue with a return to simply parents, children, immediate family would be allowed to immigrate in along with the applicant once that applicant is properly screened. And it would be better somehow, and this is a bigger subject, to go to a merit-based system as opposed to a lottery. I mean, a lottery makes me think of a gambling. I mean, do we want to just simply say, well, if you get the lucky number, you win, you get to come in? No, we have to have a means by which people can apply and they can demonstrate that they have the means to support themselves, they can contribute, perhaps they have a sponsor inside the country that will be willing to sponsor them for 3 years while they get on their feet. That was the old system. And that was a system that worked quite well. So I support President Trump's efforts to sign legislation that would grant pathway to citizenship for the DACA and at the same time build the wall, which is a sensible, normal thing to do, secure the border, and thus move the country forward in terms of a humane and proper immigration policy, one that also loosens the numbers of people that we should welcome in. Because after all, we are a nation of immigrants. We should welcome people, and we should have refugees, of course, continual. And they also need to be vetted, obviously, because the first World Trade Center bomber was a refugee. The bombers at the Boston Marathon had refugee status. So that's a system that can also be abused. But it's a system that needs to remain in place and needs to be properly administrated and responsibly administrated. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a nice day.